This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. My name is Kurt North and welcome to our continuing coverage of Season 7 of The X-Files. Joining me today are two guests, one returning guest from the main show, Katie Doyle. Katie, how are you doing?
Hi, Kurt. I'm good. How are you?
Good, not too bad. How have you managed to get over the apocalypse of the year 2000? And how are you doing? Have you got any zombies in your basement at all, or are we all happy?
No, we're happy. There might be water because we've had rainstorms for like the past 2 weeks, so I'd love to see the sunshine, but otherwise we're good. I have concert tickets coming up this week, so I'm hoping to be back to normal.
We do also have a recurring guest who's been on some of the supplementary episodes and has appeared with me on the Time Is Now over on the Time Is Now podcast with Millennium, and that's Adam Silva. Adam, how are you doing, mate?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on the main show.
Yeah, it's great. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad that we can get you on. So it's been fantastic. But that does mean you've got the 5 questions of X. So.
Wow. All right. I wasn't prepared. So.
Well, we're just goes to whatever comes naturally, I think is the best
right.
way to put it. So yeah, let's jump straight into that then. Let's jump into the 5 questions of X for you. So,
all right.
Adam, when did you first discover the X-Files?
I watched from the pilot episode when it premiered in 1993. So the very first night it aired anywhere. Excellent. I was there.
Fantastic. And what would you consider to be your favorite episode of the show's run?
Specifically Anasazi, and then if you could make it the trilogy, then that whole trilogy. I actually watched those episodes past couple days, so that was nice.
We on the Xcast Twitter, I don't know if, and Instagram especially, have been doing the Myth Arc rewatch, and I think we're there or thereabouts at the moment. Actually, I think we've done most of season 2. We've definitely got through the Anasazi, and I think we maybe at time of recording, I think we're into like getting towards the Piper Maru stuff. I think so. It's peak.
I just watched those as well. So
yeah, peak mythology.
Yeah, definitely.
So, that being the case, then, would season 3 be your favorite season, or would it be another one?
Season 3, yes, is my favorite, particularly because of the mythology. I think that all the mythology is so good and so interconnected, and but you also have the Darren Morgan episodes, you have Pusher, you have Wetwire, you have a lot of really great standalones. So, I mean, I think altogether, season 3 is my favorite.
Right. Okay. What about character then? Who would you consider to be your favorite character?
Well, Chuck Burks, who appears in this episode. That's why I'm so excited to do this one. I mean, it's hard. It's I would say, I would give it to Mulder, I guess. So,
right,
but they're so close, and I love Doggett a lot too, and but yeah, Mulder and Scully pretty close, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm a Mulder fanboy, so
right.
In good company. So, yeah, as much as I absolutely adore Scully, and and a certain character who's just not long left us and departed us in season 7, but we won't go into that. But joking aside, what would be your favorite moment from the series in total?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one.
It can be 10 seconds. It can be a minute. It can be, I think with Millennium, it's slightly easier because some of the things stand out so much. But with X-Files, it's so unique and different, isn't it?
If I had more time to think about it, it probably wouldn't be this. But since I just mentioned Wetwired, I would say the scene where Mulder comes to Scully's mother's house and they have that sort of confrontation there. That's a really great scene to me. It's one of my favorite scenes of the series.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, well, that's it. You're inducted.
All right.
Congratulations, you're through.
I didn't have to cut my hand like for the Millennium one, so
Well, yeah, it's true. It's true. Let's dive straight into this episode. We are going to be talking about Season 7, Episode 5, which is entitled Rush. It was aired on the 5th of December, 1999, directed by Robert Lieberman and written by David and Mann. And my understanding is that this is Lieberman's only directorship on The X-Files, I believe. I think that may be the case. But also on the mailbag, Asher B said that she loves the fact that Lieberman went on to direct the Dead Zone TV show, Dexter, Private Eyes, and bringing his sci-fi horror style to Jason Priestley and not being too campy about it was a particular moment. So I think we'll start off, Katie, just very briefly, just talking about him directing. It's an interesting episode to direct, and he's done a really good job here. What do you think to the direction in this episode? Because it's got some quite technical aspects to it, hasn't it, really?
Yeah, that's one of the things I noted. It's something that you notice in the episode as being really excellent. I think he made a really good effort at bringing that Vancouver kind of feel back to it as well, with the the moody lighting in the forest and everything. But with all the motion that you have to capture and the various angles that he used, and it makes a really effectively kind of creepy and engrossing episode. So I did appreciate that.
It's 1999, so it's around Matrix as well, and obviously it will relate to that. But what do you think to his direction on it? I mean, as Katie alludes to there, the fact that you do have that Vancouver style.
Yeah, I think that's one of the stronger points. And yeah, it does feel like it could have been a Vancouver episode. I think after season 6, there was some idea in season 7 that they wanted to kind of get back to some of the more basic feel X-Files episodes, so that might have been a factor. And reading some of the BTS stuff about this, that they did a lot of the special effects like in camera, like playing with camera speeds and everything. So that's how they sort of developed this sort of the effects for this episode. So that is one of the parts that stands out. I think it was nominated for an Emmy for special effects. So
yeah, it was, and as I say, with it being around the Matrix time, people would obviously refer to them. But it isn't, as you say, it's a lot of the effects were done in camera. There was an element where they actually filmed 2 versions of the scenes in the cave, so the body would be in focus and the head wouldn't, and things like that, which I thought was really interesting. But I just thought I'd just jump ahead of that, because obviously that's a bit more technical knowledge before we dive into it. But Adam, what are your general thoughts on this episode then? What do you make to it, and what would you give a rating out of 10 for? What would you give it out of 10?
I would say it's very middle of the road. I mean, it's very, there's nothing really particularly wrong with it. There's just nothing really that stands out too much, other than maybe the special effects. But it's okay. I mean, it's an okay episode. It's, it's watchable, but it's not memorable in my view.
It's not one that I've really watched a lot, and it's been a while since I revisited it, but in reviewing for the podcast, I was struck by, it's definitely enjoyable, and it's better than I remember it being. So, it's a good solid kind of hour of, kind of creepy and gory and mystery and visual and all that wrapped together. So it makes a pretty solid X-Files episode. So yeah, better than I remember it being. I probably wouldn't really watch it too often, but I did enjoy seeing it again.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think this, if I was looking at, since we've taken over the X-Cast, I would say I relate this to Trevor, in that I wouldn't necessarily, same as yourselves, I wouldn't necessarily put this episode on. And I think I'm going to find this through season 7. I've actually mentioned this a couple of times already on the recordings, that I'm really interested to see where I land with season 7. So this is not particularly an episode I would jump out and watch. I really enjoyed it this time. I watched it twice today, and I've enjoyed it both times. I thought that the same as Trevor, peeling back some of the layers, looking a bit more with the critical eye and looking at some of the deeper meanings of it does help, rather than just watching it for entertainment. I think that works and that helps. There's a few connections which I found quite interesting, which I would never have picked up before in the past. And overall, I think it's not a bad episode. So, I mean, I personally would still rate it, I would say, a 6.5 out of 10. What would you rate it out of 10, Katie?
I probably a 7. You know, it's not 8 seems a little too high, but it's not bad by any means. So, yeah, 7.5.
Adam, what about you?
Yeah, I think 6.5 or 7. Yeah. Right.
So yeah, I mean, my ratings would generally, unless it's the Halloween episode of Millennium, where I give it a 2 out of 10, would rate between a 6 and a 10. Anything below a 6, I would consider to be a particularly bad episode of an X-File. So giving it a 6 is a solid episode for me. So, but let's okay then. So IMDb gave it 7.5 out of 10. That's from 2,384 votes. And let's dive into the episode in a bit more depth. Okay, so the opening scene, we have some no trespassing signs, which always intrigues me straight off the bat, because why would you have no trespassing signs? Does that have any indication, do you think, to anything other than did people know about this this rush already? Is it something that people have been aware of? Has it been just hidden away, or is it just something that they've put in there just purely as a boundary, so it's not open to the public kind of thing? What do you think, Katie, to that? Because I always found that quite interesting on this watch.
See, I always just figured it was private property, and the kids are finding a spot to go and kind of do teenage stuff. But yeah, I never really took it to mean that there were higher powers that knew about the cave. But
yeah, I'll put it out there right now, because he mentions Oregon right at the end of the episode, and this episode has kind of a relationship to Requiem. And obviously he talks about Oregon and for the pilot episode as well,
and the vortex, and
the vortex and things like that, Adam. So I don't know if I'm maybe reaching too far, because I'm doing this myth arc and we're having a lot of conversations in the background about what's actually connected. Is Eve connected to the myth arc? Is such and such? And we are pushing boundaries to see where we can. So I've been saying maybe the super soldier program is part of this, or there's natural element, or is there alien involvement and stuff like that. So I am pushing the boundaries a little bit on what particular this episode is. So it's my pet theory at the moment.
Yeah, I would say it could be a low key wink to that maybe there was somebody who actually knew what was there on the property and it was being protected. But other than that, it's probably just a way to obviously get the police officer there, because they're in trespassing. So
yeah, and by the way, I have no indication whatsoever that they thought about that. It's just my new head cannons coming in. So this opening sequence, what it basically does is it portrays the fact that Max is older, because the way that it says Tony's a kid, and it puts in it sets the scene as most cold opens do. The fact that they're looking down, they know he's a couple of years junior to those two, and it gives you the indication of just how far Max will go, because he just say, even if someone dies tonight. So it puts him in a really interesting position. Katie, what do you think to this cold opens in general then?
I think it's one of the more effective, kind of creepy, intriguing ones, because it's the crime that he commits is horribly gory. It's one of the more gory murders that you see on the show, combined with the fog and the music, and the score too harkens back to like a creepy older episode. So I think just watching the teaser, you would definitely be intrigued. And when you go back and watch it a second time too, once you know what Max is all about, you definitely get the sense that he's maybe he's called the policeman here. He's expecting the deputy to show up, like he's planned this whole thing at the beginning. So definitely sinister.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, that's one of the things I actually had in my notes, that the fact that Tony's being played here as a fall guy, and the interesting discussion that you have that Tony, and we'll get into this in a bit more depth later on, but Tony is, as I say, being portrayed as his fall guy, and he eventually has to stand up against his oppressor in some ways. And the reoccurring theme of this episode is with Max, it's about authoritative figures being downplaying on him. But then that's exactly what Tony's doing to Max, and it's Max who actually overcomes that. And I think that's the main kind of theme of this episode, really.
Yes, yeah.
So that leaves us to where we are. It gives us the idea that Max is, obviously the bad guy of the piece. We open up once we get through the credits to Mulder and Scully sort of arriving at the crime scene. Mulder's already there. He's on his mobile phone texting, I think, if that's available at the time, or doing something on his phone. maybe learning that good old dark web. And there's a couple of things that come up here. So rather than go through it scene by scene, I just thought that, this scene seems to indicate that, there's a bit more frivolous action going on with this because, Scully comes in, Mulder gives this little quaint laugh. And then we get things like what potentially Renee was asking was Scully touching the tie after the interview scene when we walk past Chastity, and do we feel that throughout this episode that Mulder and Scully are definitely in a different place, considering this comes straight after Millennium? Because Katie, I think is my question really. Do we feel that this? A lot of people say season 7, I think, is the secret sex season. Are we seeing bits of that in this?
I don't know. As a non-shipper, I probably don't pick up on that as much as a shipper might look for it, because I saw that comment on Facebook and I totally missed anything going on with the tie. So I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I mean, they feel comfortable together. I think after they've been through so much turmoil. So I don't really get any kind of antagonistic vibe between them, or they just seem to be pretty in tune. They're just working together and in a good place.
Yeah. What about you, Adam? You're the major shipper on this show now. I think you can stand up for the shippers.
Oh well, I mean, I assume you're being sarcastic, but no, I'm more agnostic myself, I guess, on the shipper thing. I don't, it's not why I watch the show, but I'm not a no Romo either. But I don't really fall for the secret sex. I don't really believe in that, but there was definitely a concerted effort in this season for them to be more flirty, for them to be more, for them to sort of play on those things. So it wouldn't surprise me. I didn't personally notice it, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there was something there that was intended for people to pick up on.
Yeah. I think, if I'm being honest, I think I was probably pushed this way in the background of a conversation I may have had a while back. Uh-huh. So on this watch, I picked up on it more, and it felt to me like there's an indication that she's doing something, and I got the Tombs vibe when Mulder was like playing around with the necklace.
Oh yeah.
So I can see why people can see that, because I actually was feeling, because the way she says Mulder as well. So I'm trying to put my ship ahead on. I'm trying my best.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and watch it now.
Yeah. and it's nice. It's actually in some ways quite nice that, we get Chastity walking past, checking Mulder out as someone in power, for example. But Scully doesn't get jealous. She just kind of rolls with it. And I just like the fact that they actually do that. It's a bit more, a bit more real than I would maybe have in previous, where she would, if it's Phoebe or Deana. I know there's a different connotation with it, but it is actually nice to see Scully's kind of, more outgoing side to that Mulder's going, what?
She's more bemused than anything.
Right.
But,
she doesn't have any kind of serious jealousy about it. It's just she's more of giving him like a rib about it. So it's cute. Yeah.
So I think talking about these themes and talk about what happens within this episode. So the theme that I have through, a lot of us will have throughout the X-Files as a whole, is this, that the authorities are always like the people that Mulder and Scully have to stand up against. And we have this again in this one. But throughout the episode, it kind of softens, and that's happened a couple of times before, but what did you make to the fact that we have this? You know, as I say, it's back to basic X-Files. We do have a police officer who comes in and says, you know, we don't really need you, kind of thing. You need to get out of the town quickly as possible. Do what you need to do, and then take it from there. And then his thing softens as the episode goes on with the the fact of the CCTV stuff. So how do you think that was handled, Adam?
Yeah, that is interesting. I like that he's not the same like bullheaded throughout the entire episode. Like you said, in that first scene, he's like, "Why are you here? We got this." But then later on in the episode, he's like, "Okay, this really is weird. How did this, when the flashlight's taken from the locker, when we get to that scene he said, well, how's this even possible? So maybe we do need you guys here to help." So, and then of course he's defensive about his son, but then he's kind of like, well, okay, maybe what they're saying about you, is that true? So he does he's a little bit not completely one-dimensional or something. Yeah.
Kate, how did you think it was approached? Because obviously he's got. I think the concern comes from the fact it's a deputy. It's probably a friend of his. That he also says at that scene when the torch or flashlight. Sorry, I apologise. I must go American. Flashlight has gone from the evidence lockup, that he has to go and tell the wife. So I feel that there is a bit more, as Adam mentions there, there's a bit more of a three-dimensional character there, because his reluctance is more about the fact he's trying to calm the town down and also think about the wife and things like that, which I thought was quite nice, actually.
Yeah, I think so, because he's, he has a reason to be defensive and protective, and like Adam said, it's not, he didn't just keep the same mindset the whole way through, and it's also, he's trying to put on a front of being in control and having things handled, but he won't let Mulder and Scully search Max's room, but then he goes home and does it himself. So it's not like he's not taking in any kind of info and processing it. He just wants to be the one doing it.
Yeah. Also as well, during that CCTV scene, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a poster behind the police officer which says "Be alert," which is BEE alert.
I saw that. I wrote that. I couldn't see what the text said, but I definitely saw that little B. And
I was like, if that's not a nod to something, I don't know what is. So I thought as a non-shipper, I thought, how have I spotted that today? I had no idea, but I thought that was an interesting touch. But I'm gonna have to start using that maybe as a newsletter for the Xcast. Be alert! Our new podcast is out on Patreon.
There you go.
So we'll have to see about that. So what about this? We mentioned. Let's talk about some of the makeup and some of the scenes that actually play out through this episode as well, because when Scully comes to look at the autopsy, it's interesting. A couple of times through this episode, there's information that Scully doesn't have. So when she gets there, she doesn't have the pictures, and then later on, when they're looking at the medical records for Max, she doesn't have the x-rays. So there's a couple of times where she doesn't actually have the full picture, and then she obviously will develop that anyway. But some of the, as you say, some of the special effects, but some of the makeup work and some of the events that happen in here. So I'm thinking like this one here, and even the comment about the glasses being at the back of the head, and it has the great kind of effects that they have, the makeup stuff, but also by saying something like, the glasses at the back of the head, it gives you a visualization in your own mind as well. And I'd say exactly the effect during the middle of the episode where the teacher gets slammed against the back wall. I know that the Fox conducts and practices were saying that they didn't want to have the impact, so they took that out, and that actually made it better. That actually, because obviously in your mind's eye, you feel that connection rather than seeing it on screen. So I thought that was really good. But I think Tony mentioned it on the mailbag as well, that it is a really effective couple of things. I'm thinking back to Trevor actually, and some of the makeup scenes that they've forgotten there. So the season 6 and season 7, they do have some really good makeup departments and people who are doing sort of a lot of the model work and things, don't they? And these two scenes are particularly follow up on that, really.
Yeah, it's just visceral. Like, the practical makeup effects, they're really good. And like you said, like hearing that impact, I think, it does make it makes you picture it in your mind, and it makes it even worse. And that whole scene's awful.
Yeah.
I was going to say that the LA crew wasn't new anymore. I mean, this was their second season doing this. So I think that they, they kind of really knew what they were doing at this point.
They did, and during that scene, what I particularly like is the fact that Max is stood up almost like as if he's head of the table, so it's like a power move.
Yeah.
So he's just standing there. We keep reflecting back at him. This part of the direction I was talking about before is we keep coming back to him, and he has complete and utter total power.
Yeah, he's lording over the whole scene.
Yeah, which I feel is really interesting that they keep doing that, and then on top of that, have this wonderful scene with the tables going straight into him, and then the way that he trips up and things, I think is a wonderful, wonderful bit. If we talk about the dynamics then of Tony and Max, that Tony originally won't give up the names, and what I find fascinating with both Tony and Max in this, and as I said, some of the things that I wanted to talk about was the kind of authoritarian stuff that's involved here, but also just them as characters. So you've got Tony, who is not giving up the names. He's new to the area. He's a single parent. He's in a single parent family. Mm-hmm. He's obviously looks like he's been moving around a bit and has been in bad schools before, and they're constantly moving. And you've also then got, doesn't allude to I don't think it alludes to the fact that Max has got a mother either. It doesn't really say anything about that, I don't think.
Right.
But then you've got his thing is like his aversion to authoritative figures like your teachers, your police officers, and Mulder. So what do you make to that, Adam? There's the fact that they're really pushing on these two character traits of teenagers, of this kind of like coming of age kind of story.
Yeah, I think well, I will say for one thing that the sheriff, the son of a sheriff who's kind of a bad kid, that did remind me of Red Museum, because I think that was kind of done there as well. But yeah, I mean, I think you clearly get the hint that like his father was probably really hard on him, and he or possibly maybe abusive or something. That that's why he really hates sort of as you said, authority figures. And then with Max, I think he, I think part is it. Obviously, he's wanting friends. He's moved here. He doesn't really know anybody, but also I think he's probably scared. Given what happened to the police officer, he's probably like, okay, if I do give them away, I mean, look what they did to him. They'll clearly get me too. So. I think it's both of those reasons, not just that he's trying to not be a rat or whatever.
Like for me, it kind of brings up the question of why Max wants Tony as a friend. Not that they don't seem to really be compatible. So is it more that just Max wants someone else that he can control? And because he talks about inducting him into their little group and saying, "I just wanted you as my friend and you betrayed me now." So I think it's more. Not that he wants him to genuinely be a friend, but he wants someone else that he can, and someone he can easily control too, so he can just have that authority himself instead of, submitting to it as he has, in school and at home and everything.
Yeah, he wants to be in control.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the mother's working two jobs and Tony's saying you were never there, that he's seeking like those kind of friendships just of, human contact, I think is interesting. And I think they're both doing that. I think that they're both just coming at it from different angles. That you've got Max who, and don't forget as well the fact that, you say about the fact that he's coming from a police officer background, that his dad was involved in that. But the fact that, if you're growing up in school and you have somebody like that, are people going to be looking at you differently anyway, straight off the bat?
Right.
And how's that going to affect you growing up? And then, as I say, Max seems to be moving around a hell of a lot. He's never able to settle on any kind of friendships. So it's interesting that they're coming at it from different viewpoints. Some of the reviews I've actually seen is saying that they thought it's just a typical teenage, kind of story, and it's very kind of flat, and it's just the usual thing. Now they did say in a couple of interviews that they wanted to try and avoid that, and they tried to cast people around that. What do you make to the casting, Katie? Because do you think it's their good? Do you think that the critique is right, that they are just doing the plain old bland college kid kind of thing, or do you think there's a bit more nuance to it?
Especially watching it again, like for taking a deeper look at it for this, I think there definitely is nuance. There's definitely like a deeper story under the surface. You have the authority figure and control and all that, but you have for Tony and his mom, you have escaping and trying to find somewhere new to belong. You have the theme of addiction. They talk about the addiction with the rush and withdrawal. And especially with Chastity, you have, the theme of like, control and feeling trapped. So these are all like very kind of teenage emotions, and teenagers, it's been a while since I've been one, but you just want to belong in a group. So no matter where that ends up being, you want to feel like a part of something. So whether you end up, with the good crowd or the bad crowd, it gives you a sense of security. So yeah, I don't think it's just the general, teens are angsty just because they're angsty. I think it definitely, it has something to back it up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's not, it's not completely flat. It's not, there's not enough time or development to really make them, very complicated characters. But there is some effort there to not have them be, typical sort of teenage characters, or I think they, as you said, they looked for actors that weren't necessarily looking like, the teenagers were on other, sort of 90s teenage dramas and things. So they were looking for kids that looked a little bit different, but
yeah.
And of course we should mention the actress who plays Chastity was, showed up in I Want to Believe. So
she did, and I only found that out about half an hour ago.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I was like, oh, right. Oh, she's the girl in the tub.
Although what's interesting is, I think about that is that she was on Supernatural, who of course Kim Manners was very involved in that show, and I think he actually recommended her for I Want to Believe. So even though she had been on X-Files before, I think that's actually how she got the part, if my memory serves me correctly.
All right, okay. Oh, great. Yeah, no, she does. I think she plays a particularly good role because she's got to draw that line. She obviously has an affinity for Tony, but is stuck with Max.
Right.
She's trapped. But she also she is quite heroic in the fact that she's willing to give up everything towards the back end of the episode to go with Max just to get out of that situation, which I thought was really interesting. That and obviously a self-sacrifice at the end as well, where she can't take it. I mean, Katie, what do you think to that? While we're talking about this, then the fact of her character and where she ends up.
I mean, she really has two roles to play. When you see it in the teaser, she's acting, very cool, and he's not cut out for this, and his mom won't let him out of the house or something, and that's put on for Max's benefit. When you see her just with Tony, she genuinely seems to care that she doesn't want him to get hurt. She doesn't want him involved. She actually does kind of see him as a friend, the way they interact. So it's that like double role that's impressive. And then, yeah, it's just, it's kind of like that unfortunate thing of like, a female character's feeling so like she has no options left but to end it. So I don't really like that part, but it fits with the story. I think if maybe there was a little more time to flesh out like how this was affecting her, you might understand the decision a little bit more. So like it wraps up kind of fast for my liking, but it kind of fits, and it reminds you of Pam and Monday, the same sort of desperation. This is the only thing left that you can do.
It does feel to me in this episode that not really a lot happens. Like I was kind of surprised, like when it got towards the end, I was like, wow, this is already over. Like not really, it's pretty straightforward, like A, B to C to D, plot points. So it's interesting that it seemed to go quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would agree with that because you've got to look at the way that they. There is stuff in here that we have to dig for, but on the surface, there's not masses amount of stuff that you need to get through.
Right.
So, and I think that Chastity probably is the character that's least well served. But she is an interesting character in her own right as well. So there's a bit of a mix with like, could it have been developed a bit better than that? Because it seems to be obviously mainly focusing on Max, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen more of how this was also affecting her. You know, like some of her home life, or something just a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, because all she serves, as I say, is the go-between, doesn't she? She's the go-between these two characters, and that's her main resource. And as I say, it does fall a bit flat that when she does take the bullet, I don't, as horrible as it sounds, I don't really feel that much about it. Where it should be more of an impact. It should be more of a, she's got to this point, she's desperate, she's got to this desperation, she's saving, she's obviously saving Tony, but it still doesn't quite land right for me. And I think that
it's not quite.
Yep.
It's quite. Yeah.
So it is maybe a misstep in that one. And also, I think going back to Max. So what's really interesting with Max is that you've got this bravado. So you've got you've got the shutdown in Tony. He won't say anything. Even when his mother comes in, he's like, I don't want to talk about it, just let me sleep or whatever. But Max is the opposite again. So it's almost like a mirror of the two people, because he grandstands a lot against the authority. So, he'll go to his teacher 1 minute before studying and do the answers. And then, when he goes to his dad, he kind of grandstands against him. And even then, obviously, Mulder, when he's in his bed after the exertion, so the fact that that's a call for attention in a lot of ways, isn't it? I mean, the fact that you've got these two separate things. I mean, what do you make to that, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think there's a whole lot more,
Yeah, he's so arrogant and unlikable.
Yeah, I mean, but you get the sense, there's hints there that why he's like that. His father was probably maybe not even through a fault of his own, is like the best dad, so. I
think it's probably too that, being in law enforcement and having a child, you're probably automatically tougher on them because they reflect back on you.
Right, exactly.
So I'm sure that was part of the feeling a little bit more oppressive, trying to toe the line.
Yeah.
Right. And at the same time, being someone who was always going to be protected no matter what you did. So, so he could get away with being a bully and a jerk to everyone because of, who his dad was. So, but, so outwardly he was like that. And then, but yeah, at home, he's probably dealing with a very authoritative, very person who's very hard on him. So you can see why he ends up, being like that.
You've got the other scene that's kind of an interesting one is Tony and Max in the car. The fact that we've got this thrill ride. So I think it's time to literally talk about what is happening and then the allusions to, as you say, the drug taking or wherever it may well be. Mulder talks about the fact that we see that his grades are going up as his behaviour gets more and more erratic. So there's this conversation that's being had in the episode, but obviously has bigger implications. How do you feel that, Kate? How do you feel that they dealt with this idea of this kind of like the rush that the episode is centered around? That you may have this kind of the withdrawals and the impact that has on people's lives and things like that, because that's what it's really pushing at as an episode, isn't it?
Yeah, like I think it probably reflects pretty well on addiction. Once you get those highs, then the lows get worse and worse, and you need to get a fix more and more often. So, and that's what you're seeing too with Max's. Scully mentions his body breaking down, that he's doing this so much more often.
The way that it's displayed is obviously it's kind of like your superhero kind of outward thing, something like Charlemagne would do with Glass and Unbreakable and things, where you've got him, they're taking something like drug use to an extreme where it's breaking down his actual body, that the more he gets into it, the worse off it's going to be. So I quite like the kind of the the way around they did that with the way Scully's like saying, look at this. He's got arthritis. He's got stress fractures. He's got ligament micro tears. You've also got Mulder saying, like I said before, Mulder saying that his grades are going up, but his behaviour is getting more and more erratic. You've got all these kind of like sort of things that people may well see in drug addiction, and the fact that, you know, he eventually does get hospitalised. So there's a lot of like, you know, obvious connotations that they're going at from a slightly different angle if you want to look at it from that point of view. But it is interesting how they are pushing that. And then, as I say, from Tony's point of view, is that that he can't, you know, he's only just getting into it, and he's just getting that actual rush because he's just joining it. Whereas Max is more of the case of, you know, he's coming to the end of it, and the damage is being caused. So I do like that kind of allegory. Adam, so with the fact that we do have this, you know, this thing in the cave, and that we don't need to, you know, have an explanation for it because it just happens. You know, the episode isn't about that, but this kind of superhuman comic book pulpy, you know, stuff that, you know, there isn't really too much of an X-File way about things. It's something like Founder's Mutation would do years down the line. Supernatural, you've mentioned, and would have more of an inclination to be a supernatural episode. I personally haven't seen that myself, but what do you think to this as a concept? Now, I personally, just from my point of view, is that X-Files has always been good at portraying different types of episodes. So you've got Monsters of the Week, you've got, you know, their own version of Speed, or you've got their own version of, you know, the thriller, you've got horror and stuff like that. This is just another element to me. This is just like, you know, we're trying the teenage kind of superhero thing before it was really a thing.
It's very comic booky, and it does feel like this, you know, could have been a Smallville episode later on. You know, it's small, like, you know, it replaced the cave with kryptonite, and you would have had a Smallville story basically.
And do you think it was a good choice for them to do? Do you think it was like something that was a right thing to attempt, even if it didn't put it right? You know, it didn't pull out a 10 out of 10, but the fact that they attempted it, do you think it was a good thing to do?
I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's interesting and mysterious to you know, to have this cave that imbues them with certain powers. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, he said it's not really about that, and they really just needed something to, you know, there as an explanation that to set up the rest of the story. So I mean, I think it works, you know, as well as anything could. It's really not, you know, I don't think they were really looking for maybe having like a real great scientific explanation or something like that. I mean, I think it was just for what the story was and what they needed. Having this was good enough. Some kind of mysterious source of this power. Yeah.
Katie, what do you think to it then? Would you think it was a wise choice to have a go at this? Now, bearing in mind, obviously, as I say, that we've got to put it in context of where we are now compared to where they were then. So we didn't have, you know, the Marvel stuff. We didn't have, you know, right. I'm not even sure I think Supernatural, as I say, was after this, wasn't it? Or was it just starting around this time? So, you know, and then I think Tony alludes to a film that was about a decade out from here as well, which has the kind of storyline. So Katie, do you think that just trying this kind of comic booky kind of story works in an X-File world?
Yeah, I think it's fine. You know, like, as you mentioned, they've attempted so many other genres and like homages to other genres, so it doesn't really stand out as being misguided or anything. And I'm also not really familiar with the whole comic book superhero genre, so it doesn't feel as, I guess, overdone to me.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned too, like The Matrix, this episode came out in December of '99. The Matrix came out in March of that year. So I don't know if at this point in that year, if people felt tired of that already, or if it was still, you know, a fairly popular thing to emulate. So I don't remember back that far, but
I kind of do and I don't. I think I definitely had the thought. This is something even though this episode, to be fair, is fairly forgettable, I do remember it for the bullet time stuff. I was like, oh, they're doing Matrix. So I actually remember vividly thinking that at the time, because as I say, this was aired, and bearing in mind this was aired in 1999 in America, we wouldn't have got this to 2000.
Okay.
So the fact that that's quite a bit of time has happened, because the films would have come out at the same time, stateside and here. So we would have been a good maybe 6 to 10 months out from seeing that. So the fact that, I've seen this episode quite substantially later than what you would have seen it over there, it would instantly go, oh, it's bullet time, so I wouldn't have had the same kind of connotation of it being so close together. So, but yeah, I did think that, and I'm a massive Matrix fan, so it was like, oh, they're doing bullet time. I didn't really pay that much attention to the actual story, because it was like, oh, that's an interesting concept, and obviously didn't really think about it and let it go. I think it would be amiss of me to. You mentioned your favorite character, Adam, in Chuck. In Chuck, we've got to mention Chuck.
Yes, Chuck.
Yeah, what I love about this moment is Mulder's sheer exuberance over the fact that let's go into the ride of the paranormal, and I just love that bit. So it was nice to see Chuck again, Adam, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, and this is interesting because he was first used in the Calasari, and then he shows up in Leonard Betts, and then I think the time after his Biogenesis, which was just before this, then he shows up here, and then he shows up later in the season 2 as in Hollywood AD. So I mean, these are like his really close together appearances. This one right in the middle there, of him being on the show. That much was interesting. I don't know if they're just like, hey, we have Chuck, we should bring him back a lot or something, or if they were like, hey, the Lund Gunmen have their own series now, so maybe we need somebody else to pull in. I don't know if that was a factor or something, but
yeah, it's interesting because I think he will be Vancouver based. So I'm wondering if he actually did move down to LA, or he was just flown in, or potentially, because as I say, with him being in LA now, and the fact that he makes an appearance in season 11 as a different character,
right?
As the actor obviously appears in the Forehead Sweat. That it's interesting that you say that it's obviously during this period of time that he appears most. So I wonder if he was spending a bit of time in LA, or as I say, they've just flown him in. So that is something to bear in mind. But I do like Mulder's exuberance on it. I think it's probably one of Chuck's best moments personally. I don't know about you, Katie, but I think the actual conversation is, it's not just a case of like, oh, this has happened, this is a ghost, this is blah, blah, blah. There's actually a bit of, thought being given to the whole scene and the explanation, really, isn't there?
Yeah, like I always love seeing Chuck, but this one they spend a long time on his scene. It's not just like you said, saying, oh, there's a weird blur, I wonder what it is. Like he's actually, they go through several iterations of software to sort of drill down as to what it is. They theorize, about the solid object, about seeing the shadow. So there's real detective work involved too, in trying to ground this paranormal looking event, and bringing up the colors in the jacket. So I think that's really a good use of all of his exciting technology. And yeah, Mulder's just really happy to get to converse with Chuck again.
And it's amazing to think, because that SCAG is a simple process now, really.
Yeah.
You can quite do that with photographs. You can, give an indication on certain things, and it'll work things out to a fairly accurate degree. And I actually found that quite interesting, because 20 years ago, was that like really pushing the boundaries of science at that point, that you could do that? Was it available, or was it something they made up? And I've got a feeling that it will be something that would have been available to high-end video processors and things like that. And even like the use of saying 1/30th of a second. So we talked about the technical aspects at the top of the hour. And for me, I feel like the David Amann or, the director have had a bit of an input on this, on, we want some technical aspects actually within the show. So saying that, that the frame rate is 30th, is 30 frames a second, over there to 24 frames a second here, depending on the frame rates and whatever. But it's nice to see that there's a little bit of science in there that's actually, grounded science as well.
Yeah, they're using available technology, and for a good use. And I think Chuck, doesn't he say he's like beta testing that software?
Yeah.
So it's probably pretty new.
Age. That's all I'm going to say. There's a lot of this episode focuses on Mulder and Scully being slightly either too old or in an environment where they're portrayed from a point of view of being, as I say, in slightly differently. And this one, it mentions quite a few things. You know, we use the use of Scully being a Betty, for example, or it smells like Teen Spirit's mentioned. We've got 2 bedrooms, which are teenage bedrooms that have got loads of posters on there. Even little mentions of like that Mulder faxes the report to Scully, whether or not that was like coming to the end in 99. I can't remember. I remember working in my work when I started working in an office in 1999, and we did have a fax machine, but they were definitely coming to the end of the life at that point. And, you know, you've got the things like, say, Mulder saying old and stupid and the back in the day stuff. Do you think that worked well, Adam, using the age as a concept? I know they'll use it again in the revival seasons. Do you think it's used well here?
I mean, some of the references, I think, like, you know, like the teenage spirit reference. I'm like, yeah, you know, teenagers wouldn't talk like that. You know, they wouldn't say that. You know, it feels kind of like, you know, it feels like a middle-aged writer writing, like, you know, how teenagers would write. So it does have that kind of feel to me. I think some of the references are a little too cutesy, but some of it's funny.
Yeah. What do you think to it, Katie? Do you enjoy some of the payoff with these little comments?
Yeah, for the most part. I especially love how Mulder, he's kind of exasperated by saying, you know, bear with us because we're old and stupid. Right, you know, kind of, you know, self-degrading. And I, you know, and to a teenager, like anyone over the age of 30 is ancient. So I think that is probably true. And at this point, Mulder, they're what, in their mid-30s by now, probably? But maybe they're feeling...
Scully was born 64, wasn't she?
Okay.
64, 74.
Okay, so 94. Yeah, in their 30s.
So, yeah, late 30s, maybe early 40s, yeah.
So, I mean, they're not old by any means, but when you're confronted with, you know, the vigor of high schoolers around you, I guess that would kind of prey in your mind a little bit. Just the passing of time and, you know, also the concept of, you know, seeing the clock hands ticking throughout the episode. And I did enjoy, going back to the beginning, that when Scully arrives at the hospital, Mulder asks her about traffic and she says it was slow going. So I kind of like that little addition of, you know, bringing in the factor of how time normally moves.
Yeah. I thought it was there were certain elements that were quite nice. Again, it goes to that playful mode that they're kind of mixing it up with a bit of lightheartedness with some of the visceral scenes that we see in the episode. I thought some of it was nice. You know, Scully still is a Betty, and she doesn't need to be back in the day. So that I would defend that, and I'm sure plenty of other people in the fandom would defend that as well. But yeah, and you know, Mulder's not doing too bad either. You know, he's weathering quite well. You know, he's not doing too bad either.
Yeah, they've got some years left in him.
They've still got some years left, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Although I don't particularly want to see David Duchovny on stage taking his top off, but which I had to see back in Manchester a few years ago. But you know, I've seen pictures of it since. So
did you go to a concert?
I did go to a concert.
Okay,
yeah, I went to a meet and greet with him in Manchester a few years back for his last tour.
Okay, I saw one too, but we didn't get the top off, unfortunately.
No, well, I think he only did it in Manchester. So I was like, thanks. You know, I know Penny Evans, who's a friend of the podcast and on Twitter quite a lot. I had the lovely chance to meet her and talk to her for a bit. I think she had a good time. So that was fun. But yeah, other than that is pretty much where we wrap up. You've got obviously the end scene, the bullet time, and you know, and it gets, as we mentioned, got filled up with concrete. And you know, and the very end scene, as I say, talking about slow going, you do see the clock and it's starting to move really slowly. So, how do you think that Tony Adam would react now? The fact he hasn't got that chance to get that rush again, and it indicates that he's going to live a slower life now, which is really interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least he wasn't really too far gone with it. And I was gonna say, like, I feel like this episode, I guess we had seen more of them being able to use the powers, like, for fun or for like whatever they whatever they really wanted to do with them, other than, and like, it kind of gets straight to the murder and the Max is out of control, so they have to stop him. So you really don't get like a great sense of like the rush from it that they have, and like how it changed their lives and everything. You don't really get that sense much before it's already, they have to stop this, they are hurting themselves, like Max is out of control. So I think that's what's kind of missing from the episode to me. Like,
yeah, no, that's a good point actually, because you don't see the effects really. You just see him being the evil nemesis, if you're talking him in comic book style, and the beginning of Tony's journey.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you're right, you don't get that. Even like a scene where you'd see maybe Tony goes and does something. Apart from maybe the car scene is about the closest you get to it. But even then, it's Max showing Tony what it is rather than Tony experiencing it.
Right. I feel like that was a sort of a missing step, because by the time he gets the powers, he already has to be stopping what any more mayhem from happening. So he really doesn't have any chance to sort of see, like, get addicted to this and get all there's not it's really not developed any. So like, I don't feel like it would be too problematic for him, because he really didn't experience much with it. He basically uses it to stop to stop Max. So I don't feel like he's probably got that addicted to it, or they would have that big ramifications for him.
Yeah. Katie, would you agree with that? Because I do. That is a very good point, that we don't see the birth of that happening to either character, or even like Chastity either. That it is a missing piece really. It's kind of like, oh, they've got the power, they know how to use it. That's it, done. Yeah,
I think it kind of. I agree to some extent. It would have. It depends on how much you can pack into an episode, but it would have helped ground it a little more, I think. Part of what I feel is missing is just, you don't really see a lot of Mulder and Scully, but they don't really have a lot of agency when they're shown. Like, they're kind of just following the evidence. They're always kind of a step behind, and they kind of just spend the episode theorizing. They don't really, they're not out there proactively.
Yeah, it's one of those where they don't really play into like the resolution of the.
They're not proactively trying to.
Yeah.
Things really could have played out the same way without their involvement.
Exactly. So it just gives the audience information of, why it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in some ways that would have, because they're never in any peril either, really, at all. There's not one moment where I can think of where, there's a threat that's made to Mulder when he's in the bedside, but that's not a threat because he's like, he needs the fix. So, there's no like, you're right with agency with that. I'm not as adverse to that on occasion, being, enjoying like the Outer Limits, and sometimes you have a parable tale and stuff like that. So if they land in an Outer Limits episode, for example, it doesn't really bother me. But I think I'm probably in the mixture of the two. If you're not going to do that, if you're not going to give them agency, give the other characters some more. Then don't, like, maybe not have them theorize as much. Maybe go down a hungry route where take Mulder and Scully out of the equation by quite a bit more, and then give the two characters, the kind of almost like the battle scenes between them. And in that way, you're saying that these two characters are too powerful for Mulder and Scully to deal with, and let them battle between them. And then they just be the ones that go, right, we need to react to this. This is what maybe happened. And, and then maybe have a parable around it. But it doesn't do either. It doesn't give them. It has this idea of like almost like a Magneto Xavier, if we're talking X-Files, X-Men sort of territory, that you've got like that kind of thing going on, but it and you can see it going that way, but it doesn't go wholeheartedly into that. So I think that's probably where I would fall. I think there's definitely something where Mulder and Scully need to be either more involved in the situation and have a bit of danger to them, and potentially Tony might save them, or Chastity might do something to help them, or you take them out of the equation altogether and have them battle out between them. And there's not ironically enough, there's not enough of a rush at the time. I think it's probably what I'm trying to say.
And they never experience the phenomenon themselves, like they go to the cave and nothing happens. And so it just that part kind of falls a little flat for me. Then it feels like it wraps up really fast, and then you don't always need an explanation of why something happened, but I feel like you could have used a little bit more, like the idea of whatever that power was affecting only teenagers because of their body composition or hormones or whatever. That's kind of the last thing you end on. So, and then like the usual X-Files thing, all the evidence is erased. So yeah, and the ending is a little weaker than I think the beginning is.
Yeah, well, that's been a really interesting discussion, and there's certainly things I've never thought of before. So it's interesting to think about that. Maybe the fan fiction writers can start getting to work, and we'll get them on it. There's probably already is something on it, to be honest. But there's bound to be something in Rush that someone's written about. I can guarantee it.
Something about that tie.
Yeah, exactly. Any final thoughts before we go into the mailbag? Do you have anything you'd like to bring up that I've not maybe mentioned at all, either of you?
No, I mean, you mentioned in the beginning sort of the pilot reference with the Vortex and Oregon. So that was a neat little, and of course they go back to Oregon and Requiem later in the season. So, I mean, it is kind of a...
Yeah, which of course has, Billy Miles and his dad, who are both coppers.
Right.
So, which I find an interesting mirror to this episode as well. So it's almost like, it's almost like they knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Well, okay then. Well, let's go and dive into the mailbag. There's been a few comments. I was a bit late putting this on, but there's been plenty of people jump on, so we'll go and do that now. Okay, so the first comment that came up was Renee. Renee, we've answered your question about Mulder's tie. I think it was. Adam, do you think she was playing with a tie or not?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, because they were doing this during the season, they were doing little things like that to sort of play with the flirting.
Well, I didn't notice it, so I have to go back. So I'll answer on the Facebook group.
I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. I'm not going to rewatch it just.
Okay. I've watched it twice. I've watched it twice today. I won't be watching it for a while now. But
did you watch it at the same speed, Kurt, or did you watch it at different speeds?
I just ticked it up to 30 frames a second.
Double the frame
24.
rate.
Yeah. Okay, so Tony's been on. He said, I've always really dug Rush. Sure, it's basically a Smallville episode, or more appropriately, Smallville made episode over and over again for about 7 years, and it's a fairly throwaway and ridiculous, but it's a well-crafted bit of comic book pulp. The scene where the teacher is impaled in the library is easily one of the most gruesome X-Files deaths ever, and I really appreciate the meditation on aging in this, and how Mulder and Scully, as late boomers, let's not forget, are confronted with the dawning realization of middle age, a Betty back in the day, with the laughy smiley face. Side note, Josh Trank's Chronicle ends up doing exactly the same plot almost a decade later, but with added superhero theatrics and found footage aesthetic. Have any of you seen Chronicle?
I have, or I've seen part of it, but I do remember seeing it and like, wow, this is like Rush, and like somebody doing a found footage version. Yeah, I had the same thought when I saw it. I was like, yeah, this is like somebody saw this and did like a movie version of it. So it is interesting. But,
what about you, Katie? Have you seen it? I haven't.
No,
personally.
I haven't seen it.
I remember seeing the adverts, but I've never got around to watching it. So what about the most gruesome X-File deaths ever? Anything that comes to mind that's more gruesome, or it's obviously up there, but is there anything that comes to mind with gruesome deaths that you particularly like or not like, depending on how you view it?
I mean, it's one of the more effective parts of the episode. It's not, but it's not up there with like, the the sheriff and his wife being beaten to death at home or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that visceral, but it works. I mean, it works. It's kind of shocking a little bit that.
I think you see more of the body than you normally would. You see kind of full on the skull caved in and everything. So I think earlier they may have shown, worked more with, reflections and different angles. So this one is like they're really trying to showcase that prosthetic effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about reflections, we've got Chimera coming up this season, so that deals with a lot of reflections on theme and mirrors and stuff like that, which will be an interesting discussion later in the season. Christine Ponce says, I think the show has always had problems portraying teenagers. Would this archetype of the lonely nerd represent the writers, or would they believe he's represented the audience? Oh, and all those giant shirts on T-shirts as an unequivocal uniform. Yeah, I think, as I say, the teenager archetype thing, Adam, you mentioned it before about, it's middle-aged writers writing teenagers. It is something of an issue. It's very 90s, I think, Katie. Would you agree? It's just the way that things were then.
Yeah, I was trying to examine, the hairstyles and the big clothes and everything. So I did, I tried to examine pretty closely the set decoration in Max's bedroom. So trying to think what the set decorators would think a weird teenage boy would have in his room. You've got all kinds of, music posters and actually...
Ophelia. Yeah, there was Ophelia there, wasn't
that was in Tony's, yeah.
That was in Tony's, yeah.
In Max's, he had like The Doors, Busta Rhymes, Metallica, a few other bands, Stained. Fun fact, Stained, the drummer is the son of my 4th grade teacher.
Oh, right. Okay. Fantastic.
But it's funny, he actually had a lot of like alien things. He had the UFO sign, he had like a little rearview mirror hanging UFOs, he had like alien lights, so I don't know if that was, just fun Easter eggs or if there was kind of more in there.
But as I say, I mean, with the fact that you've got Stain, Metallica, Busta Rhymes, and then you've got, I can't remember the artist, it's Natalie somebody, isn't it, for Ophelia? What's that episode? What's that called? Natalie Merchant. Okay. Yeah, so the music styles are quite different as well. So that's a little design thing in there that's not necessarily something we'll catch, but I like the fact that they're saying they're two very different people, which I thought was quite nice. But yeah, like that jumped out at me. I think there was like an airport thing in Max's as well, wasn't there? And then obviously the shoes. Yeah. Because I thought that was a nice touch, actually. It was like, okay, he's obviously gone to the local store and nicked all them.
It's going through shoes like something.
Absolutely. Okay, then. So let's have a look at Natalie Tsay, who says, I work next to a 23-year-old and I'm starting to feel very back in the day. I really like the clock ticking very slowly at the end. His perception of time has altered, as it does for all of us. And we haven't mentioned the music. The music, right from the very beginning, has a kind of a propulsion, kind of a like a train, almost like rolling around, which I quite like the aesthetic of. There was a couple of bits from the film as well, very loosely placed in there, which hasn't been as overt as previous episodes. Like SR 819 was very much around the film time,
right? Yeah,
and was quite heavy with it. This had moments where it was like, that's in the film, but it's in the background enough. It didn't bother me at all on this occasion. What do you think to the score on this one, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's not kind of overbearing with taking some of the cues from the movie, as season 6 kind of had those moments, like you said, SR 819, where it's very, they're clearly taking some of those cues a lot. I would say at this point overall, and this is not my favorite period of Mark Snow's music. Like, he gets really it's really less melancholy and less of the sort of synth stuff that I kind of like early on in the early seasons. Like now it's a lot more of like whatever it is, oboe or something that he's using.
Oh, see, I like the clarinet oboe sound and kind of that like breathing background sound.
Yeah. I mean, it's not my sort of favorite Mark Snow music, but I mean, it works, of course. It's never, never bad.
Yeah, and of course, it's in the Millennium wheelhouse of using like the piano and the oboe stuff and things like that, which is used to really great effect in Millennium. So with that show closing up, I think there'll be elements that will start to weave into the X-Files. Something I need to listen out for, actually.
I found part of this though, like the theme that's really specific to this episode. I found it very grating, like that continuous like metal tapping noise. It just goes over and over and over, and that like kind of like it sounds like a glass harmonica, like that, almost like a circusy sort of sound. I don't know if that's meant to represent like innocence or I don't know, but they don't really work together for me, and that metal tapping just grates.
Yeah, I mean, I think the metal tapping's meant to be that it's that, as I say, that propulsion of
yeah.
tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it was done in Dunkirk for Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, and it wasn't Dunkirk, it was Interstellar, where they had like this ticking time clock in the background for quite some time, and that works really, really well. But it felt like a ticking time clock. This felt like just some kind of like mash of like the propulsion of like of building that tension. But and then I suppose it goes with I suppose it goes back to the whole, what is there on screen that's actually making you feel the tension in the first place as well? If there was like a build up to like a monumentous moment, then you may have felt it a bit better. But I think it was because it was right at the very beginning, right in the first scene of the opening credits. There's nowhere for it to go, so it kind of just stays as it is until the end of the episode.
Yeah, like it was mainly used when Tony's kind of discovering the cave. So that's kind of the moment of tension building, I guess. But it just like I get the intent, but it was a bit too much, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so Cortlan Waters Bartley has said, I've always kind of liked this one for no reason in particular. I think there is good atmosphere with the creepy cave in the woods. Plus, I always enjoy it when Mulder and Scully are interacting with snarky teens. Also, as Tony mentioned, the theme of age and aging seems to fit nicely into season 7, even if we don't learn until season 8 that Mulder may be grappling with a secret brain disease and that Scully has maybe contemplating IVF. So that's interesting just from a modern viewpoint on, this kind of storytelling that we mentioned the secret kind of season of sex kind of thing that, that we've not really got to the elements of the brain disease. It obviously was an afterthought anyway, and the IVF stuff, but, maybe instilling some of that in this post, looking back on it, would that have made the episode any better? The fact that you've got more of a rounded, like, concerns for Mulder and Scully, if you had that actually included in the episode, would that make any difference to how you felt about the aging aspect, Adam?
I mean, that's an interesting view, but of course, like all that stuff sort of like retroactively put on. So, I mean, it's hard to judge it that way. Yeah.
It certainly is. But as I say, headcanon's a wonderful thing. Katie, have you got anything to say on that?
It's kind of like, the benefit of hindsight, but if it helps to look at the season that way, then I think that's fine. It's, a matter of like what the writers had in their head at that moment. I don't really see it. I think this is it's not that deep, I don't think, in this episode. I don't think it really needed to be.
Yeah. I think, so just let's have a look at it from a season or writer's perspective then, rather than just like sort of retroactively putting something in there. So season 7, so if I say, for example, Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine and Voyager all lasted 7 seasons. X-Files was supposed to finish at the end of season 5, but it continued on into season 6 and then season 7. We don't know at this point whether or not the season is going to end with season 7. So it's quite natural and understandable for them to start talking about the show as an aging show. It's had its peak in season 3, season 4, season 5. You've had the movie, you've had the dipping audience in maybe season 6. It has, I wouldn't by any imagination say has lost its appeal to the main audience, but it is an older show. You've got, as I say, Smallville, all these other shows maybe coming into the limelight. You've got things like The Sopranos and things like that are kind of kicking in as well. So, it is the right time, I think, to start talking about this, the 7th season being potentially its final hurrah. I can't think during the rest of this season whether or not we get anything more on that. I suppose Hollywood AD, for example, is probably a good example of that, where they're kind of talking about, you know, the way they are and where they've been and producing that film. So I can see why they've written it into this episode, and it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. Because as I say, you know, the whole zombie aesthetic that's been brought up for season 7, you know, things like the Millennium episode, Hollywood AD and things like that is kind of like almost like a Dead Man Walking season 7 kind of thought. And Darren Mooney has said on many occasions TV shows do get to this point where they start talking a little bit more like this. So it will be interesting to see how we get on, because we are only early in season 7, aren't we? So it'll be interesting to see if any of that kind of reflects in later episodes.
Yeah, I just think of how hard it must have been to write season 7, just because, you know, if you don't really know where you're headed, if you're ending, if you're not ending, if you're trying to wrap up to a certain conclusion, if you don't know that, it's tricky. So, I mean, props to the writers for, you know, kind of doing what they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Heather Ben says, I didn't like this one for years. I thought it was boring and that nothing happened in it. I was about to put it on my skip list when I suddenly realised I also became old and dusty like Mulder and Scully. Now it amuses me. I think because of how over the top these kids are. There's also some pretty dark stuff in it. The violent teen is almost a decade older than me. I'm not surprised at all that Carter and staff thought that someone almost 30 would make a convincing kid. Now, that's in itself, that is Hollywood through and through, isn't it? The amount of actors that play younger people is amazing.
Like vast majority of actors playing teenagers are like in their mid 20s or so. I mean, that's usually the case. So.
Yeah. Okay, so Andrew Levitt says, I love this episode. It's the perfect combination of exploring teen angst, superhero mythos, and the cool science fiction concept. Robert Lieberman's direction is phenomenal, giving this episode a Vancouver-esque look. And unlike most of season 7, the cast seem interested in what they're doing. Perhaps because Duchovny and Anderson have limited appearances in the episode. This is easily David Amann's best script for the series. Now, this is something that I wanted to bring up, or not necessarily bring up, but it appeared in my brain when I was watching it the first time round, that there's elements to this I did feel that Dave Duchovny wasn't quite there, but there was other parts that I thought he was really good in. So there was elements where the playful moments, I thought it felt like David Duchovny was in the moment. During the Chuck scene, I thought that was quite good. During the interrogation scene of Tony, I didn't feel he was like kind of there at that point. It's not something that and this is another thing I'm thinking about season 7 that I might look out for a bit more depth, because it's not, I've never really paid that much attention to it. But did you feel the same? Did you feel that David Duchovny in this was a bit mixed, or do you think he played well right throughout the whole episode? Adam, I'll leave that with you first.
I thought it was fine. I think it's a bit overstated. There's some people who feel like that David Duchovny like basically phoned in all of season 7. I don't think that's true. I think, you know, there's times when he's turned on and not, but you know, that goes back to the earlier seasons too, not just now. So yeah. I think it's a bit overstated that he's like, you know, just phoning it in every week. I think that perception had more to do with what was going on behind the scenes as opposed to how he was actually acting. Because I think he and of course Jillian are always professional, and they're always doing their jobs no matter what they feel about like whether the show should be over, or you know, I'm not happy with things, you know, this isn't good. I feel like they always do their jobs pretty well, and they're not you know,
because around now is when it's the Carter Duchovny kind of legal thing, isn't it? It's starting to kick in. What did you think, Katie? Go on, sorry, carry on.
Oh no, like this was the, you know, David Duchovny was being he was being very ugly at a lot of points right now. Like I'm not saying whether, you know, just deserved or not. I'm just saying that if you read interviews from this time, he was not holding anything back as far as how he felt about the show and wanting to leave and all that stuff. It was very but I don't feel like personally feel like that translated to the screen. I think he's still a professional actor doing his job. And, I mean, you can see when they're more engaged. You can see they're having a great time in X-Cops later in the season because David and Julian are getting to do what, something that's really interesting to them. I mean, here, what do you really expect from them? But I don't feel like they gave bad performances or something, even in episodes that they weren't engaged in. So.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think, Katie? Did you feel any of that at all or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add. I couldn't really pinpoint a point in this episode where I could definitely tell that, oh, he's just reading lines and not caring. So, and I think most of it, when he's engaging with the banter and all that kind of stuff, I think it definitely comes across as he's engaged in it. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the old and stupid thing. I mean, I think that before that, it was maybe a bit too dry, but
maybe
old and stupid was quite a good delivery.
Yeah,
so.
the intonation he has is spot on. So,
Chris Knowles, solid meat and potatoes X-Files with nifty in-camera FX. Very wry self-jabs, acknowledging the series was getting a little long in the tooth. Plus, Nikki Acox is bananas cute. Bananas cute, Chris. Thanks, mate. But yeah, she is cute. She is cute. And that's it. That's all we've got at the moment. So thank you both for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you both again. It's been a while for all of us. Katie, I was back in Fight the Future was when we were last talking, and Adam, I think we were in season 3 Millennium Mode. So it's nice to have you both on. If people are wanting to hear more from you, what are you up to? What have you done in the past? And where can people find you online? We'll start with Adam.
Well, I just have the XF_Lost Episodes Twitter account, which I basically just use to follow you guys at this point. So that's for the that was for the virtual season 12 that me and some other people did. The site for that it's still out there. virtualseasons.x-sites.org for that one.
Okay. And Katie, where can people find you?
I'm in the X-Files basement, kind of chatting when I can. On Twitter, I am at Designer Doe, and I have joined Instagram now, so that's Kathleen Doe Creative Design. So those are kind of my combination personal and business graphic design accounts.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I have to say, we did Tithanus together, but that also seems like a very long time ago.
Oh yeah, it's been a long time. We did do Tithanus. We did it with Marlene, didn't we? So that was a fascinating episode. I really enjoyed that episode. Was fun. Actually, it was a really, really good episode. So thank you both, as I say, for coming on. You can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. You can find me talking about Red Dwarf on Shipwrecked and Comatose, and that's on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod. As I mentioned, the time is now. We've just about wrapped up that, but you can catch all 3 season coverage on that at the Time Is Now Pod on Twitter as well. So we've got about 75 to 80 episodes. And, we're looking to its 25th anniversary in October of this year. So we'll be definitely doing something for the 25th show soon. So that'll be good. And you can also find me on the Star Trek Picard podcast, Make It So. And you can find that on Twitter at Jean-Luc Podard. So those are some of my podcasts, but that's not all we're discussing on the We Made This Podcast Network. So straight after this, you'll hear some clips of other things that are happening over the network, so please feel free to listen to that. But until next time, Katie and Adam, thank you again. It's been much appreciated, and we'll see you again in the future.
Thanks, this has been fun.
Right, thanks.
Excellent. And until next time, remember, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Gotham University, a Batman podcast.
God, so speaking of masks, there has been some news. It sounds like Zack Snyder is in the news again. What's going on with the masks, Jay?
My boy Zack! Just when you thought that the controversy of Zack Snyder was simmering down, he rose back up and just not only blew up the internet, not only broke the internet, he figuratively and probably literally fucked it right back into hysteria with this whole Batman news going on right now.
We dig music.
I recently watched the movie that came out recently of the book about all the black metal scene.
Oh, yes. I actually have that book. Lords of Chaos.
Lords of Chaos, that's it, yeah. I watched the Lords of Chaos
That's
movie.
the one with Macaulay Culkin's brother in it.
Yes.
Or something like that.
It's really good.
And where they really, really pissed off Varg by casting someone Jewish to play him.
Which is always a good idea.
Yeah.
Always pissed off Varg McKenna if you can, because he's a f***ing bellend. Not scared of you, Varg, even though you stabbed people fucking 27 times.
And got caught on a train with a rocket launcher at
Yeah.
that point.
He's a bit of a bellend.
A little bit racist. A little bit questionable.
Yeah, just a bit.
Uses papyrus as a font of choice.
And that's his worst crime.
That 100% is. I'm not even joking. Like, he's done some bad shit, but papyrus, unfucking acceptable.
Beautiful.
We are Starfleet, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
Oh, look at Garrick. You know, he looks so cute in this.
Or I'm watching an episode he's not in, and I wonder what Garrick's doing right now.
Where's
Maybe
he
I
at?
should text him and see what he's doing.
Okay,
text him, see if he's watching this. Yeah.
So are you guys like texting buddies? Do you have a group chat going?
Pretty much. Yeah. It's a bit alarming, particularly when I accidentally get CC'd on the Obsidian Order chat. But
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The Xcast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the Xcast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.